this time I feel my luck could change. Kill me, Sarah, kill me again, 'cause love's gonna be a glorious day. Pull me out of the crash. Pull me out of the lake. 'Cause I'm your sailor. We're standing on the Better stay. This call for me by name.
What's up, everybody? How's it going? How's your Tuesday going? It's August 16th, 2022, and it is the Crush Live Collins show, which we do every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Of course, today is Tuesday. I had to go up to Maine for a little family. Unfortunately, had a death in the family, so I was not here on Monday, but if you do subscribe to the channel, keep notifications on, you'll always get notifications, and I usually put up the live stream link a couple days beforehand. So we're doing this on Tuesday. If you want to get on the show, you can do so by pre-submitting your hand. You can click on the little link in the description because we read them all, we screen them, we pick the best ones for each week, then we take those and make them into YouTube videos. We have 5 calls on tap today. Hustler Casino Live also announced that they will be doing a high stakes week next week, and I was already scheduled to go out there on Thursday and Friday, so I will be commentating Thursday and Friday. I was originally supposed to play on Thursday, but unfortunately it's not going to happen at 100, 200, 400. I even asked Feldman, there was maybe like a 10 or 20% chance. I said, could I play in one of those games? And he said, probably not. And I can understand that about knitting up like 100K in front of me. Also, too, the mechanics, like I said, the mechanics of bringing that type of money out there, wiring it for a 5-hour show. I talked about this on the regular podcast that I just put up this week. A little bit difficult to do. You know, one of the things too, people understand when you do play high stakes, like a guy like Garrett or something like that, you have to keep a bunch of liquid money around, which of course means you can't do anything else with that money. So that's another consideration that you need to make, you know, when you're playing super nosebleed stakes, is having this liquid capital around that most people are not going to have a couple $100,000 sitting around. So, but you know, that's probably first world problems. We could all have that problem. But anyways, let's get into the show here on August 16th. Like I said, we've got 5 callers here today. Like to keep the show as interactive as possible, so join me in the live chat. I always read from it. Thank you, Michael G., moderator extraordinaire. So here we go. We are going to start this one off with our first caller here. This is Jason K. Jason K., you are up, sir. First, hello.
Hi, Bart. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. What's going on, Jason?
So I have a hand here from a couple of weeks ago from Philly Live.
Philly Live, okay.
Which is not my normal casino. Normally I play at Park, so I don't really have any read on any of these players. I've never played with any of them before.
So this used to be Rivers, is that right? Was this used to be Rivers?
So Live is the newest one that they built near the stadium complex. Rivers is the old Sugar House.
Oh, old Sugar House, okay. Philly Live.
Yeah.
Right. Same company as Maryland Live, I assume.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So for this hand, the table's 8-handed. They're running their games 8-handed these days because of COVID. I'm the effective stack at 1435,
Okay.
and it's a 2-5 game.
Okay.
So I am under the gun +1, and I look down at black pocket 7.
Okay.
So I open to 20, which is standard raise for the game. Hijack, 3 bets to 100.
Okay.
I'm kind of on the fence whether I want to call or just throw it away at this point. And then the cutoff overcalls. So with the overcall, I figure it's a good spot to set mine. They both have me covered. So I flat, pots 300 after they take out the rake, which is the blind.
So just a little thing about Jason, just a little thing about poker terminology. Not that it matters, but just to stay consistent, because sometimes people get confused. So cut off cold calls, right? In between.
Yes.
Usually when we say overcall, it means someone calling after you. So like if you bet and somebody called and called. So this is a cold call in between. So there's a dead call in between here. And, sometimes when you have a hand like ace, king, jacks, queens, you 4-bet here because there's this extra dead money. Sevens is obviously probably not, strong enough to do that. You have to start thinking about what is a cutoff cold call range. If the guy is reasonable, it usually consists of like 9s through jacks, sometimes queens, sometimes ace, queen suited, sometimes ace, king off. I actually saw Garrett cold call queens out of the small blind against Andy's 3-bet. And, it's 80 more for you to call. So, if you were to look at, can I make 15 times this? You are deep enough at 1200. I mean, I would probably call here. I think that I would, as I've talked about recently on the show, calling here with suited connectors, low suited connectors would be a rather big mistake. I would much rather have a pair here and set mine for sure than like 5-6 suited, something like that. So, okay. So you call and the pot's 300.
Yeah, pot's 300.
Uh-huh.
And so we see a flop of jack of spades, 7 of diamonds, 6 of spades.
Jack of spades, 7 of diamonds, 6 of spades. So you flop middle set.
Middle set.
Okay.
And with the action that's already happened behind me, I am looking to check raise the pre-flop raiser here. Mm-hmm. So I check to him, hoping that he's going to bet. Unfortunately, he checks.
Okay.
But the cutoff then bets out for 125.
Interesting. I had a hand like this on the podcast this week. Exactly the same, where you get a field caller. This is a 3-bet pot, so it's a little bit different, but you get a field caller who's the one that bets, and then you're sort of torn because that bet could be just like Jack X, some sort of protection bet with 10s, and then if you check raise, you might just scare the guy away, as opposed to the pre-flop raiser, who actually might have a stronger range in all the overpairs like aces and kings, where you're just trying to shovel some money in. So, I mean, the board is draw heavy. But usually in spots like this, unless the guy's a huge spot and he's betting larger, like blasting the pot, you're not going to fold. I probably call here in a lot of different scenarios. The other thing, too, is sometimes the preflop raiser will check these hands like overpairs to check call instead of betting. A lot of guys will check when there's multi-way action, and you don't want those hands to fold either. So I would probably tend to call here a lot.
Yeah, that was my thinking. I call in hopes that the pre-flop aggressor would come along too, but he folds.
Remember, the pre-flop raiser is not going to overcall proper terminology like calling after you. He's not going to overcall with like ace king here, like he might call heads up. So it's just to possibly, not have him fold out like jack 10, king jack that might be checking here. He would overcall, but if you check raise, he just folds out. Now, you guys are 1435 effective, so when you make this call, the pot's going to be 450. The only issue is that you're out of position, which means if you're continuing to give the betting lead away, this guy can be doing a lot of checking back. Even if he bets the turn and you just check call, now, like on the river, if you check, he might just check it back. So at some point, I like to take the betting lead away in a spot like this. But okay, so now we are at 550 to the turn.
Yeah.
Right? Oh.
So the turn card is not a great card. It's the 5 of diamonds.
Not a great card in the sense that 8-9 gets there, you mean?
8-9 gets there. It puts another flush draw out there. And those are really the two that I was worried about.
Remember, this is different, though, because a lot of people will forget. Remember, this is not a single raise pot where 8-9 suited might always be represented. This guy cold called 3 bets. I don't know what the deal with him is, but that tends to cut that stuff out,
Well, so one thing that I've noticed, especially in the Philadelphia area, a lot of what you preach about, they should have range, they should have that range, kind of goes out the window with half the players, and then half the players know what they're doing and know the ranges they should be on.
So it wouldn't surprise you mean, if he cold called 8-9 suited here to a 3-bet?
Oh, would not surprise me at all.
Okay.
It wouldn't surprise me. To be honest, it wouldn't even surprise me if he called 8-9 offsuit. I don't have a read on this player, whether he's a good player or a terrible player. So I kind of, until I have a read, just assume everybody's playing, terribly and could have any two cards at any time.
Now, some people in the live chat are saying this is a good card to actually lead into. And again, I would say that might be, it's just a rare spot because you're already way far from sort of theory that you've got a cold call in there. You're not in the blind. It's not like it's a single raise pot where you're completing out of the big blind and then you've got some leads here. This is a 3-bet pot with a field better betting. So pot's 550. Okay, do you check?
So I check, and the cutoff bet's 275, so half pot.
All right, so cutoff bet's 275. Obviously, it's of note that there are front door spades out there. So the cutoff could very easily have like a hand like King Jack here, Queen Jack suited, Ace Jack. And he's just betting to basically take a showdown here. I mean, even if the guy sometimes has 8-9 suited here, I'm putting money in. And if he's going to have 8-9, he's going to stack me here with a set versus an improbable straight. I just think that there is way more Jack X or other hands that he's going to have here that I can extract value from. So I'm going to be check raising here for the reasons that I talked about on the turn, because I don't want to just check call and then just check the river. And unless you develop a check call and then just lead on a blank type of play, which is another kind of weird one that you can do.
Sure. So my thinking was I called here in the fact that if I raise and he's just on a naked flush draw, he's going to maybe fold if it's not a nut flush draw. And I really, since he's showing a lot of aggression in the pot, I don't want to let him off the hook. So well, I just called here.
Okay. I mean, that's a valid reason. I'll just push back a little bit on, even if that's true, you're in a situation where if he's not going to fire the river on a bluff, all right, he's fired twice and you've called, right? And let's say that he's only going to bet when he makes it, then you're almost giving him like a reverse free card and missing out on some value. If he's like, I'll bet again, if the guy calls, I'll just give up. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I get that. And I was kind of torn at the time. I really thought that, I didn't think he had jacks. I would have thought he would have, maybe 4-bet or been a little more aggressive on the turn. I thought that I was in a good spot where I could call here and lead out pretty much any non-spade river card.
Is that what your plan is? Your plan to actually bet the river? Check call bet?
That was my plan.
But doesn't that go against the fact that you just said you're calling because he's firing spades, though? Wouldn't you want him to get him to bluff, though?
That's a good point.
I will also point out here too, it's Jack of spades, 7 of diamonds, 6 of spades, 5 of diamonds. So there's a possibility of Jack X of diamonds, which is top pair and a flush draw, which is never going to fold. So those are the sort of quandaries that you get in with just sort of, giving up kind of the betting lead. Also, there aren't like a crazy ton on this particular board, there aren't many blanks. I mean, you're going to be gambling on a non-spade, non-backdoor diamond, and then a lot of cards bring in like weird, like one-liners, right? A 3, a 4, an 8, a 9, or like an over. I mean, there's half the deck's not going to be a blank. That's just a thought. But okay, so you call.
Yeah. So my thought was with calling, I'm going to lead out almost, any non-spade river, and my thought was I'm going to take a bet fold line where, maybe, a third pot, and if I get jammed on, I can reevaluate
on a
from
blank
there.
Like if the river's like a 10 of hearts, you're gonna bet fold. I mean, you've got about a pot. Well, that's a hell of a bet fold. I mean, you got a pot size bet left. What's the river?
So the river is the 6 of clubs, which is the perfect card.
Okay, well that's good for you.
Yeah. So at this point, I just figure I have a pot size bet left, so I jam, trying to represent the busted flush draw.
So you jam.
Yeah, if I jam for 935.
Wow. So Hero up front jams for 935. And wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I thought that he could call me light, thinking that I'm busted flush draw, some sort of other busted draw, and he goes in the tank for a good long time. And when he's tanking for so long, my thoughts are, oh man, I made a mistake. I should have bet maybe a third
500.
to a half pot
Mm-hmm.
and tried to get paid off.
Mm-hmm. And what ends up
Um,
happening?
Luckily, he eventually talked himself into a call, and I think it was a pretty light call, maybe even like as light as like ace jack with the ace spades,
Mm-hmm.
thinking, oh, he's got to be bluffing. So
Well,
I
he would
turn
want. I mean,
over.
he would want to have a jack. He would want to have a jack with no spade. Actually, would be better for him
Well, I was
to have
thinking
no
he might
spade.
think that if he has the ace of spades, I can't be bluffing the nut missed flush because he's
Right.
covering that.
But wouldn't he want
Um,
you to be bluffing that though?
well,
Would
yeah,
he?
but with him calling, he would know like, oh, he can't be that strong.
Well, I mean, if you were in your opponent's spot, you wouldn't want to have a spade so that you have, as my
Okay,
opponent, the chance that you're bluffing spade. So he wouldn't want to have a spade. So he called. Did you ever find out
yeah,
what he had?
he did not show. He just, he maybe had me covered by like 200 or 300. He got really frustrated, picked up and left as soon as the hand was done.
Here's the thing, Jason, about your line here, and this is one where I could almost transpose I remember just the transition when Black Friday happened back in 2011. And you'd have these kids come in to play live that played online. They were obviously good players, but there was an adjustment period that they would have to make where they would lose in the beginning. And I think this is a really good example where somehow if this online player, I'm not saying that your opponent was in there with ace jack, they would just call, right, when you jam for 935 because the draw's missed. Where I would say that this line, like if I'm your opponent and I was betting, say, queen jack, jack 10 suited that I had flatted with pre, this is such a crazy underbluffed line by you that unless you have shown me that you are an absolute maniac, I'm not going to call with jack X here. Because it looks so much like a bluff, it almost can't be. If you see what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Like
so
check call, jam.
I talked this over with my friend Dave, who's also a CLP subscriber, and he was convinced that the guy had 8-9 and just couldn't fold the straight.
So mathematical 55 says, has caller ever jammed pot on the river and not had it though? And not only, I think that's a good point. Not only that, but in this specific scenario, like in a 3-bet pot, like, caller has like, again, it's a 3-bet pot. So it's hard to maybe like ace 9 of spades, ace 8 of spades, something like that, where nut flush draw, check call, turns, decides to play passively and then jams at the end. It's just very, very rare for me to see somebody have that type of holding, that is busted spades in a given scenario. So, or like 9-10 of spades, 9-10 of diamonds, and then jam on a blank, because this is a blank. So it is interesting. I don't know what the guy had, but I will say that what we can take away from this is I want to take the betting lead away at some point, because I don't want to get into this situation where I'm donk shoving pot and I have jack X fold here,
Sure.
So I appreciate the call, Jason.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. As we roll along here again, guys, if you want to, we'll see if people who have as much live experience tend to agree with me. I mean, I folded jack X there. And like I said, unless that guy is just super maniacal, it's just such an underbluff type of spot. Obviously, ace 6 of diamonds is also another one. But again, ace 6 of diamonds is pretty. You go back to on the flop here. I'm just going to bring this back up here. First of all, if ace 6 of diamonds is even defended to a 3-bet, that really, I don't know, even can you call, this goes to why it's so hard to play these hands. Are you calling with ace 6 of diamonds to a field better of 125 with the pre-flop razor behind you? I don't think so. I wouldn't call. Even to the 125, it just goes to show you like how tight you're supposed to play multi-way. So, I mean, we have to really, really reach, right? To be in those particular spots. But like I said, that's why I like to keep the show interactive. Again, if you do want to submit to be on the show, you can click on the little link in the description. If you're a CLP subscriber, you will always get a personalized response from me. You'll always get priority to be on the show as well. Let's move along here. Who we got next? We have John S. And I have to say, John S. is next here. John S. I don't. John, have you called the show before?
Hey, Bart, can you hear me?
Yeah. Have you called the show before, John?
Yeah, I called. I've had a few call-ins, and I also did the Postle win rates.
Well, I mean, that's what I was going to say, John. So a lot of people
Yeah.
don't know about John S. because John was one of the first guys with this other guy, Russ McGinley, who's actually since passed away. Sad story, he had cancer. Who really compiled early on some of the data as it came in from Postlegate a couple of years ago. And it's just funny, John. There's one guy on the internet. His name is Everett Caldwell. He owns Postle Life. He just continues to like start these Twitter accounts like Postle Investigation. He's the one guy that doesn't think that Postle cheated. And he brings up John S's data of the win rate, that it was off by a certain amount as evidence, or one of the things as evidence. It's just ridiculous. It's ludicrous. But
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, you mentioned that on Discord a little bit. It's funny. I had never heard of it. It is. I know I didn't get it perfect. I was in between. I had the time to do it, and you were on it, and a lot of the CLP subs or Squish was on the show and played against Postle. So I thought it was worth to get something out there to realize how ridiculous it was. So if it wasn't perfect,
now
it
it's
was
just
ballpark enough.
It's one of these things now where people are like, well, what happened? And it's completed now. I mean, Veronica and Todd would tell us Dan Druff recovered the money when they self-served themselves. Remember, I was sued, but it was kind of a big ploy. Like, they never served us, so I didn't have to pay any legal fees for defamation. It was a big joke. And again, one of the most basic question that you can ask is, if this guy was the best poker player in the world, why isn't he playing now? Oh, he just retired, right? He just retired. Like, no one's ever seen him play since. So anyways.
You could ask about 100 questions on that and not get an answer. So,
all right, John, you got a hand for us?
I do.
Yeah.
All right. So we're at a Lone Butte Casino, which is in Arizona.
Okay.
Arizona. It's they just moved it there. It used to be not too good when it was spread limit, but they get a decent 2-3 going now. It's no talking stick, but it's right next to my work, so occasionally I'll stop there and have a session.
So true no limit now in Arizona, right?
We are true no limit since December, I want to say.
Mm-hmm. And is this a 2-5 game or what?
This is a 2-3. They rarely get the 2-5 going. I put my name on the list, but we only got to about 6-handed.
Like 500 buy-in or what?
I think it's 1,000.
Oh, nice. Okay.
It's not too bad. They've always been pretty deep. Anyways, we're about 1250 effective, so we're pretty deep, even though I think the other two villains in the hand actually kind of ran it up to that.
Do they straddle in this game at all, or is it just
so this casino allows button straddle and upfront straddle?
Okay.
And everyone likes to button straddle, and
I'm not a huge fan. As I've said, I'm not a huge fan of the button straddle and hold them per se.
And it starts at under the gun, or it starts at the blinds.
Right.
So small blind and big blind, you might as well just fold,
of course,
because you got.
And that's when I talk about sometimes actually. I mean, obviously, limp re-raising is almost an LOL play, but if there's ever a time to develop any type of limp re-raise range, it might be in a 9-handed button straddle game where you might want to complete with some hands because you're at such a positional disadvantage that you might have some limp calls, limp re-raises, and limp folds, but it's not the most common setup. Okay, so 1250 effective.
1250 effective. So undergun opens to 15.
So it's not a straddle pot.
This is actually, it's about 50-50 in this game.
Okay.
This was not a straddle. This guy, I think someone told him to never open limp, so he started opening every hand he wants to play. So he's opening about 50% from under the gun.
And you can notice the 5x open size, which makes the stack shallower, which is very, very typical when stacks get deep at this level. Okay. Yep.
So it comes to me. I'm in the low jack with 9 of clubs, 9 of hearts, and the club is relevant. And I raise it to 60. I've been 3-betting this guy all night, and I'm just going big because I want to play big pots against him. So I went 4x.
So under the gun to 15, hero 3-bets 9-9 in the low jack to 60. This is 9-handed, right? By the way, this actually might be one. It's very rare that you encounter a theoretical flatting pre-flop range in this configuration from the low jack. The further away you are from the button, it's really only like a very small sliver of hands. This actually might be one where you do sometimes flat. I mean, I don't hate the 3-bet. It depends on how tight the guy is. And it's
other players I would flat for sure. This guy, not a chance. I'm playing big pots with him. But we're 7 or 8 handed. I think we're 8, and I didn't know if someone's walking. So
okay, so you 3-bet to 60.
We have a cold call from the small blind, who is an older Asian gentleman who is tired of me 3-betting him to death.
Okay.
So they're both, and then under the gun calls. So we're 3-handed to the flop, about 180.
Okay.
Flop comes 10 of clubs, 9 of spades, and 7 of clubs.
Okay, so you flop middle set.
I flop middle set.
Don't really have to worry about straights, right? We wouldn't think here. It's on a single raise pot.
I don't think so.
Yep. The only hand you're losing to right now is 10-10.
Correct. Which both could theoretically have, but you know, if I get set over set, whatever.
Right.
So it checks to me, and I bet out 100, which in retrospect I don't like. I think I want to go bigger because these guys aren't folding clubs to me. They're not folding an 8 to me.
Yeah, actually, I tend to agree with you. In a situation like this, which is a 3-bet pot, and then you have a cold caller in there on this texture, where a lot of these sort of Broadway types of hands or like jacks, stuff like that is represented. There's really no reason to go small here. I mean, it's not like you're betting aces in a single raise pot against the big blind where people have straights and they have a lot of 2-pair and stuff, and you have a strong hand. I mean, I probably would have gone at least 125, something like that, because you're not going to really be able to dink it. You know, it's not like when you bet 40 or 50, you're going to get. Now, somebody might say, well, you know, most of his range is like aces, kings, queen. I mean, obviously he 3-bet 9, so he can have 10-10 here too. But okay, so you bet 100.
Right. I wish I had gone bigger. And, you know, it's interesting. Like, if there was a good player in the hand, I might have bet something like 40 to try to get them to attack that range. But these guys have no idea. So I'm just betting my hand. I wish I'd gone 125, 140, and just make it big, because I don't think they're folding a jack to me. They're not folding queen jack. They're not folding 8. They're not folding clubs.
Right. Okay. So you bet 100.
100, and they both call pretty quickly.
Wow. So small blind and under the gun call. That's crazy. Right. So now the pot is 480. You've got the overcall from under the gun, which is quite interesting. You know what that is. Obviously, you've got to be somewhat cognizant of clubs. You've got queen jack out there. You've got king jack. King jack is double gutted, by the way. Right? King jack suit is double gutted to an 8 and to a queen. You've got.
I don't think this guy's folding 7-8. I don't think he's folding 9-8.
Which, the Asian guy?
No, the under the gun.
You don't think that 7-8 is going to open and overcall the flop here?
This guy was chasing everything to win a big pot. He was one of those guys. Right. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think he was trying to win big hands all night, and he was doing it by chasing. So I think he's overcalling with an 8. All
right, so 480 to the turn.
Which is kind of a good and a bad card. It's the ace of clubs, which obviously gets rid of a lot of the club draws that they could have, but it does bring in clubs. So it's kind of good and bad. And it checks to me, and we kind of talked in Discord about this one when I posted it. I think this is a check here with our stacks, because, I mean, we still have 1,100 left. I'd hate to bet and open up my stack. I think if we're 500 behind, I can get on board betting 200, 250 and just getting it in and boat mining. But I think here, I don't want to open up my chip stack.
Well, it's really, I mean, I think you bring up a very interesting point in the fact that the ace of clubs is much, much different than like the 3 of clubs, right? So if it's the 3 of clubs, I think we see a lot more of representation of flushes here. And of course, the reason why is because no one can have ace-x of clubs here. So now when you're trying to think about, well, what ranges do they have? You know, you've got the Broadway flushing cards, which would have been combo draws on the flop anyways, which would have had to have played slow, right? Queen jack of clubs, king jack of clubs. Those are huge draws on the flop. King queen of clubs. I mean, I don't know. Jack 9 of clubs is a pretty big draw on the flop too if they're in there in a 3-bet pot.
So you
have the 9 of clubs in your hand, so.
Right? Because I did think that's really relevant, because if someone has 9-8 of clubs, I mean, what rec is ever folding an open-ended flush draw to anything?
Yeah, I mean, man, I tend to want to bet for those reasons, and I think you can do a handcuffing bet here. When I mean like sort of variable turn sizing bet, where you can really handcuff these guys. Like if you go like 150 here, it's not a bet that I'm going to go huge with. And because the ace doesn't really interact with the board all that much unless somebody has like ace 10 specifically, right? Because you know, if they've got jacks or queens, so they're just going to fold out. But if they have a high club, then again, in these spots, they're not really supposed to have one club because that would be an offsuit hand, right? But, you're saying kind of wide. I think I would take a little bit of a handcuffing bet here and go like 150 to 175, to be honest with you. Now, if you say, oh, small blind jams, I might have a hard time folding because of what I broke down. There's so few Broadway flushing combos, and then in order for them to have it, they'd have to play it super slow on the flop. So I might just be very comfortable just actually playing for stacks here in this configuration in a 3-bet pot. Now, maybe it sounds to me like you're saying the under the gun might have like a suited connector, like 5-6 of clubs. Who knows if he even check raises that,
Right. I think the small blind, if he's putting money in, I'm not too happy about calling. I don't see this guy putting money in without a made hand of a lot of money. He'll call, but I don't think he's putting in a raise without queen jack of clubs minimum. That was my read on it.
So you checked back?
I did check back.
Okay. River?
And then so we get to the river, which is probably the second worst card in the deck. It's the 8 of diamonds.
All right. So now we've got a board of 10, 9, 7, ace, 8. So it's a one-liner to a jack, one-liner to a 6, and front door clubs, of course, have come in on the turn. Okay.
And small blind thinks for about 20 seconds and leads for 300.
So small blind bets 300. And then what? UTG folds?
Yeah, he kind of laughs at it and folds, and that's on me.
Oh, man. I mean, I hate folding sets like in these sort of types of low-stakes games. So the pot's 780. It's 300 for you to call, right?
2.6 to 1 on a call.
Boy, and the other thing, too, which is sort of the truth serum to this, is that, sure, like, if it was heads up, you might find a call, right? If it's heads up, who knows what the guy's doing. He's betting into 2 people, though. And the under the gun could have a straight or a flush here, too. I think I might just fold here, John. It's a one-liner to a jack. There just seems like there's a shit ton of jack X here. And I'm trying to think of, like, is there value that... I mean, people will be like, what if he's value betting ace 10? I don't know. I mean, that's so far out there for small blind because he's got to worry about the guy behind him,
Right. And
yeah.
I flipped my hand over and showed him, and he had a mask on. I couldn't really get a response from him, and he kind of looked ahead like he didn't want to look at it. And I ended up folding. I thought it was pretty trivial. Like, he could have clubs. I mean, I think his cold calling range definitely has jacks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not his cold calling range. His cold calling range pre-flop has jacks, and also what is he continuing on the flop with?
Right,
Black jacks is definitely. So I folded. He kind of, you got a bluff. He was playing off, and the guy next to me who had a prison quality Gucci tattoo and was about 5 Karvaskis in said, I saw his card. It was a red card, and it's like, I think that's a pretty trivial fold against a lot of wrecks at this level.
Yeah, I think just the multi-way nature at the end and just the river just bringing in just like absolutely everything. You know what I mean? I mean, it would be slightly different if it was a jack, to be honest with you, or a 6, but this 8 is just, it's a really tough one. But I think what you take away, I think like you hit the nail on the head where the turn becomes more of a bet because it's the ace of clubs as opposed to some other club. Then you've got the 3-bet scenario because all flush draws in general would be combo draws on the flop. So there's less of them and then they'd have to play them slow. So, I mean, it's not a crazy mistake on the turn to check it back, but I think at the end here, you got to live to see another day.
Yeah, I think flop, like I said, I would have wished to go bigger, especially against Rex. And that was my big question on the turn. We kind of went back and forth, but I kind of do like the small. They can't really handcuff me. I don't think they're going to jam all in, but if they make it 450, I think I can boat mine pretty comfortably from there.
Yep. Thanks for the call, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bart.
All right. I want to point out that we've got our buddy here, Low Limit Poker Cash Games podcast in the chat. And I want to just tell a funny little anecdote. So my mom, and by the way, I have not listened to this episode yet because I had to go to Maine, but my mom texted me and emailed me. She's got a Google Alerts for my name that comes up, Google Alerts. And she sends me this podcast, Low Limit Cash Games, which I subscribe to. And the reason why I came up was because the title of the podcast is Bart Hanson's Genius. So check out Low Limit Cash Games. This was from last Wednesday. My mom let me know that Low Limit Cash Games has a podcast titled Bart Hanson's Genius from last week. And I think his name is Brett, I want to say. And he specializes in low limit. It's a good podcast, though. Nice that it keeps it short, straight hands, talking about how to beat low limit and a lot of these exploitative types of things. And he's saying that, this is a bluff like 1 out of 1,000 times. And I don't know if it's that extreme, but I would definitely fold if I were John S. So again, if you want to get on the show, if you'd like to get on the show, you can do so by clicking on the link in the description. It tells you how to pre-submit your hand. Let's move along here. We actually have 5 calls today. Let's go to Will. Will A, you are up next, sir. Hello, Will. What's going on? Hello.
Hi, Bart. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. How you doing?
Pretty good. Better than I deserve.
All right, well, should we get right in?
Yep.
All right, so we're playing 2-5 at Encore Boston Harbor. It's 9-handed.
A place that I would like to go to. 2-5 at Encore Encore in Boston. I mean, the only thing right now, even though they expanded their hours, is that my understanding is it's a battle to get in the game, right? You got to get it there at the right times because it's still limited table access.
Correct. There's only 15 tables.
Yeah.
And I think about 4 that are 2-5. So you got to get on the list, honestly, before you start driving over.
And then is there any chance to get in the game in the afternoon or at night, or do you have to be there in the morning?
No. So I typically log on to the list at about 4:30, drive over at 5.
Oh, okay.
And I'm usually sitting down by about 5:30. So if you give yourself an hour buffer, I think you'll be
well.
safe.
I mean, I'm sure I'll be over there. Like I said, I live right in between Chasers and Encore Boston Harbor. Of course, the thing Encore Boston Harbor is they're not open on the weekends now. Right?
Although I've heard that's changing in the fall.
Okay. Right now, I think they might have reopened on Sundays, but they're not open Fridays and Saturdays. And what time do they close at? Do they extend it to 10 p.m. or something? Or
At 2 a.m.
Oh, they're open at 2 a.m. now? Oh, okay. Well, I could roll down there on a weekday night. Okay. 2-5 Encore. This is a 1K cap, right?
It is 1K cap,
okay.
And it's playing pretty deep. So we're 900 effective, and I'd say the average buy-in to the game, people sit down with about $800.
Okay.
Okay. So under the gun +1 is an older guy, definitely not an OMC, but he raises to 15.
Okay.
He's called by a pretty young kid, looks a little bit like Harry Potter.
Okay.
I would have carded him coming in from MP1. The cutoff calls, and we're in the small blind with ace of spades, ace of hearts.
Okay.
So we 3-bet that to 80.
And so 4x plus a couple of the calls would be like 9. Yeah. Okay. So you go to 80.
Yeah, I could hear the argument for going as high as 100.
Yeah, I mean, if you went 4x plus the 2 calls, it would be 100, right?
Yeah.
You've gone 3x plus the 2 calls, a little bit more than that. I mean, I tend to go a little bit larger from out of position. Where I would take the sizing if the effective stacks were shorter, just to sort of get you don't want to blow anybody out because then you're not basically folding post. If you had a couple of guys that were cold callers that were like maybe this dude opened to 15 off of like a $400 or $500 stack, then you had a couple cold callers. Now you don't want to go super high, right?
Right, and this was a pretty splashy game, so I think I could have gotten away with a bigger raise size here.
So up to 80 from the small blind with ace, okay.
And all 3 called pretty quickly.
Wow. All 3 call. So the pot is 320.
Yep.
You've got about 820 left in your stack, so it's 4 ways in a 3-bet pot, okay? And you've got 2 double flat. Double flats mean, of course, call and call, right? MP1 and cutoff. Double flatters, okay?
Okay, flop comes 10 of clubs, 9 of clubs, 9 of spades.
10 of clubs, 9 of clubs, 9 of spades. You've got the ace of spades and the ace of hearts, okay?
Correct, no club. And we lead for 105. So about 1/3 pot.
Yeah, this is interesting in the sense for this type of sizing because it kind of reminds me of a little bit of the first caller. The difference, of course, is the board is paired. When it was 10-9-7, the first caller, in a 3-bet pot cold called. Here it's 10-9-9. You still have that whole thing with the broadways, being, and there's a lot of draws out there. And then, obviously it's an issue of does somebody have a 9? Because if you've got double flatters in there, they're obviously playing way too wide, right? So you don't have really 9x, but they do. The theory goes in that spot, you probably can take a small size, or you're supposed to take a small sizing with a wide range. So, okay, so you go 105, yeah.
Yeah, exactly my thoughts. I didn't want to overcommit myself because I knew there were a lot of 9s in both of the overcallers ranges.
Yeah.
So under the gun +1, the original razor folds, MP1 calls, and the cutoff folds.
All right, so MP1 calls with a guy behind. Fold. Okay, so pot's 530.
Yep.
Okay.
Turn, great card for us, deuce of diamonds.
Okay.
And we continue for 275, about half pot.
Wow. Interesting. Because I thought, a lot of times this gets checked here with sort of respect for the fact that the guy can have a 9 in a spot in a situation like this. 275, which is just over half the size of the pot. I mean, obviously, if it was like 10-9-3 turns a deuce, of course you can go large. He called and then double flatted. I would never want to blow somebody off of a 10 here. Now, if you're saying there's no way in hell a guy is ever folding a 10, even if he calls pre-flop with like king 10, queen 10 off, then fine. It's just my first thought.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from. I thought 275 was still small enough that he would stay in with a 10, and that's obviously what prevented me from going way up to something like 80% pot. But I did, with all the draws, I did not think that checking would be a good decision there.
I mean, the draws, yeah, you give up a free card to some of the draws, but then you also get maybe some floats to bet off, although you look pretty strong when you lead here into 3 people. So, I mean, a lot of times, if I'm MP1 and I have call with the draw, I will take a card instead of starting a bluff because you're so skewed towards value with a flop C-bet. I think some people agree with me in the live chat that they would check or bet a little bit smaller. But okay, so you go 275, okay. And then what happens if he jams here? I don't remember what happens. What are you planning on doing?
I think without the ace of clubs, I have to call here.
And you think that he's playing like a delayed sort of semi-bluff?
Yeah.
On the turn?
Yeah, I think that's definitely in his range.
I mean, if he jams here, the pot will be like 11, and then you guys put in, 4? It'll be like 11, 6 to call or something like that. You're going to be getting about 2 to 1. Just doing some back of the paper math, or 5 to call, like 11, maybe 1,200, 500 to call. Yeah. And that's the other thing too about going larger is you might get pot stuck here too on the turn.
Yeah.
So you go 275
and he calls.
Call.
And
I remember this hand. Yeah. Okay. So MP1 calls. So now the pot is 1,080. It's 10-9-9 deuce. You've bet twice as the preflop 3-better, and you guys have probably like just under 500 left in your stack, right? 480, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if this was too ambitious, but part of the thinking around the sizing on the turn bet was that there would be about a half pot size bet on the river to shove.
I mean, so you're going for stacks here, is what you're saying, basically.
Yeah, if we get another
10.
If we get another blank.
I mean, you only have half pot size bet left, so yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so moving on to the river, it's the 8 of spades.
So the river's the 8 of spades. Mm-hmm. So it's 10-9-9 deuce 8, and you have half a pot size bet left. So obviously there is some concern that completes one of the draws, or he was sandbagging something, right?
Exactly.
And now you have this whole thing where what should my play be on the river? Because if he busted clubs, might he bluff?
It's such a good bluffing card for him that I do actually check.
Well, I mean, this is where it's really close at half pot. I really think it's a really, really close spot because, and this is where I would sort of lean toward, this is why I remember picking this hand, where I would lean towards, in general, are my opponents bluffing too much? Or excuse me, in general, are my opponents not bluffing enough? and are they calling too much? Because one of the small stakes exploits guides always say is like, I'm not a huge fan of check calling the river in sort of even up to mid-ish to low stakes live games. The reason why I don't like check calling the river is because opponents don't bluff enough, and they will call a lot of bets that they will check behind with if you check to them. So, for example, if this guy had ace 10, king 10, queen 10, he's just going to check it back, right? But if you bet, he very well might call. If he has clubs, you have shown so much strength here, though, that I don't know if he's going to bluff clubs. And in general, my case is that people don't actually bluff enough. And I don't even know if clubs are supposed to be bluffed here, to be honest with you. I mean, like, how often do you end up here with nothing? I suppose sometimes because it's a brick on turn, but you've just looked so strong through this entire hand here in the sense that you've bet the flop into 3 people. You 3-bet out of the small blind. You bet the flop. This is not a flop that we're in general betting like with ace, king, ace, queen with a ton of frequency. I mean, this is not a board of 4 deuce deuce where we might triple off or 7 deuce 3 rainbow. So you've bet the flop. You've continued to bet the turn. You look very, very strong to me. So I couple that with the general underbluffing sort of population here and the fact that people will call because they see other people in the player pool might not bet 3 streets with an overpair here. They'll tend to call down. You've made the pot so that you only have half a pot size bet left. So it's 1,500. I mean, he's going to get 3-1 if you move all in. And I assume if you check and he bets all in, you're going to call. So yeah. I think at this stack depth and for those reasons, I jam here. Now, if it was the 8 of clubs where the front door came in and it completed everything, or like the king of clubs, then I would advocate checking most of the time to check fold to reasonable sizing. Say it was the 8 of clubs, right? Now we have a situation where, okay, we can check to check fold, but we'll sometimes win if it goes check, check, right? Because we'll win against the 10. But here, I think for those reasons that there isn't going to be that bluffing frequency. You're going to call anyways. I want to get value from a 10 here, so I'm going to jam.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that's why I think I've been thinking about this hand so much, because I had a plan and I deviated from it on that 8 of spades river, and I think that was a mistake.
So what ended up happening?
He checked behind.
So hero checks and villain checks behind, which means you're going to win, right? I assume.
I win and he mucks, and I don't know what he had.
So, I mean, he should have a 10 here, right? At least.
I agree.
I mean, it's not even like he really should never have jacks or queens. That should be 3. I mean, I guess maybe once in a while. So the question then becomes, well, does he call your shove with the 10? Could you bet 300? I mean, it's all about, you're never folding. So it's all about how much can you extract. The point is that I think for those reasons, the river is a value bet. You can debate on the sizing. That's because you took what would have been a larger sizing than some on the turn. Now, if you had gone like 150 on turn or check turn, say it went check, check on the turn and the pot remains 530 and, you guys have like around 800 left. I still think the river's a bet. I mean, it's not a crazy bet, but it's still a bet, for those reasons. So that's what I would just take away is that I think people at this level in general call far too much. They're not bluffing enough. And I think you look really strong. So the bluff's not going to really come in a spot like this. So anyways.
Thanks a lot, Bart.
Yep. Thanks for the call, Will. We got 2 more callers here. And, oh, man, there's this guy. I don't know if he's scheduled for, I thought he was scheduled for, let's see here. I thought he was scheduled for 5:45. There's a really, really important call that I want to go over. Let me just do a little checking here from Tyler that I was even going to bring into the regular podcast. Let's see. But he doesn't appear to be on the line. So we're going to go to Keith, and hopefully Tyler H will call in. He is scheduled for 5:45. But I don't see him, and I don't see that he emailed. Maybe Mike G can help me out. But let's go to Jason here. Move along here to Jason. You are up next, sir. Hello.
Hey, Bart.
How's it going?
Good, man. How about yourself?
Pretty good. So you got a hand for us?
Yeah, so I have a hand from the Pepper Mill in Reno, Nevada.
That's that weird, like, one blind, right?
Yeah, that's the one. Yep.
0-5 or
So
something?
yeah, so this is 0-5. They've recently incorporated a mandatory $10 winner straddle. It plays at probably half of the tables, and it was in effect for this hand.
So a winner's straddle is what I like to, it's a rock straddle, meaning we did this in PLO a lot in LA. If you win the pot, you are the straddle, right?
Correct.
And then it
Yep.
goes in order.
Yep.
So it's like
Oh no, sorry. No, the small blind and big blind are still in their original positions, and there's just a $10 straddle for whoever won the hand.
Right. So say I win the hand and I'm in MP1, I put a $10 straddle out. How does it go pre-flop? What's the order?
It would just go, yeah, so small blind and big blind would post their blinds, and then it would be under the gun acts first. But the small blind and big blind are not after MP1.
Okay, so with a rock straddle, it usually goes right to the left of the straddle. So if I was under the gun and I won the previous pot, I would rock straddle. Now +1 would be first, and it would go in order. If I was the button one, the blinds would go first. But you're saying it just keeps the natural order?
It just keeps like it follows the button like it usually would, and then the $10 straddle is applied to whoever won the last hand.
So the straddle goes in order too, then? It's not like last action.
I feel like I'm not describing this well. It's so there's the button, then there's the small blind, the big blind. Whoever won it is where the $10 straddle is located, and the first person to act is under the gun +1, or under the gun, and then it goes around, and then either the winner straddle can choose to check if it's been limped to him, or he can choose to raise, or call if it's been raised before him.
So the winner straddle goes last.
As long as there isn't a raise before him.
Okay.
If there is a raise before him, then he
Boy,
has to
this
act
is
first.
like nuclear physics.
Yeah,
I don't know. I
sorry.
understand what all these gimmicks are. I don't understand why they can't just go in order and like the straddle will go. He has the option to check or do whatever. But okay, so there's a winner straddle.
So there's a winner straddle, and the winner straddle is on MP2, who is the main villain in this hand.
Okay.
So it folds to MP1, who raises to 30, and then MP2 elects to call. And then I am in the cutoff.
And MP2, of course, is going in order because there was a raise. If it was a limp, it would go past him, but now it's his turn.
Exactly.
Who the fuck came up with these things? Okay, so MP2 calls. Okay.
MP2 calls. And then I am in the cutoff, and I have ace of hearts, 10 of hearts.
All right.
And I elect a 3-bet here. I think I can go either way with a call or a 3-bet. My VPIP over the past like 2 hours or so had been really, really low because I had just been card dead. And I think people were starting to have a perception that I was overly tight. So I figured a 3-bet would be generally better here, as I could just get some more folds. And if not, take a heads up. I don't know what you think.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too is MP2 is already in there for 10, right? So he's completing 20. So a lot of guys, it's almost like a kill pot and limit. They'll complete much wider than they sort of should be because they've got money in there. So you will see this guy be wider. So this is a slam dunk 3-bet for me all day.
Yeah, I agree. I think I may have taken slightly too small of a sizing here. I 3-bet to 120. So 4x.
I don't think it's too bad. By the way, how deep were you guys? We didn't put that in there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I have 1200. MP2 is the effective stack in this hand at 445, but there's some other stacks that are relevant as well. MP1 covers me. I think he had like 3K or something. And then the big blind is also going to be in the hand, and he also has like 3K or something. But the only stacks that matter are MP2 has 445 and I have 1200.
All right, so you 3-bet to 120. Okay.
So I 3-bet to 120, and then it folds to the big blind, who he and I had sort of a history going through this session. Before my 2 hours of card deadness, we had sort of gotten to this like war where we played every single hand together. Anytime I raised, he would call no matter what. His range is essentially anything. So I think in this case, I mean, usually I treat 3-bet cold calls as like a pretty narrow range, but we had this pre-existing dynamic, and he ends up calling out of the big blind. And
he covers, right?
Yeah, he covers me.
Okay, correct. So he cold calls. Okay.
He cold calls, yep. And then and it folds back around to MP1 and MP2, and both of them call as well. So the pot is 480.
MP2 call. 480 4 ways.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So the flop is the 10 of spades, 9 of spades, 7 of clubs.
Well, same flop as what we had before.
I saw that.
So 10-9-7, but hero has ace 10 this hand in a 3-bet pot. Okay. Yep.
Correct.
Uh-huh.
And so MP1 or big blind checks, MP1 checks, or so, I'm sorry, I'm saying this wrong. The big blind, he had been actually doing this thing all night where no matter what, if he was the first to act, he blind bet $5. So he did that here. So before the flop ever came out, he threw a $5 chip in. The dealer asked if it was a valid bet. He said, yes, I'm blind betting $5.
Okay, so I would just treat that as a check. He's just giving up his action, basically. Whenever you see like these little min bets or something like this, I'm just treating this as a check. If these other guys call, treat those just look at it like it went check. Yeah.
Exactly. So MP1 calls $5, MP2 calls $5.
Okay, so it's basically check. To me. And what I would say here is kind of the same thing that I said on that texture from before. Yeah, you don't have a set here. And yes, it's true that you can be behind to like jacks because you're in this spot where big blind has cold called, right? But it kind of seems like this guy's off the rails just from that action. So I would probably tend to go maybe a little bit on the larger side. With that being said, that the difference between this and having a set, of course, is that, you know, you have much more equity with a set against combo draws, and you can get a lot of heat put on you here by combo draws.
Right. Yeah, so I ended up spending a lot of time on this street before I made my decision. So I think generally if this were just like a heads up pot, I would tend to check here because I think the 3-bet caller's range pretty heavily favors my raising range here.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know if that rule sort of still applied when we're 4 ways in a 3-bet called pot.
I mean, I would bet for value / protection. And then again, I would lean on these situations where it is a 3-bet pot where it's, you know, obviously you can have a lot of heat put on you here by combo draws and you can be in some very, very dicey spots. But in general, I take this sort of, I lean towards the over exploit of betting for value and not worrying about that and sometimes possibly folding out some of the best hands with bet folds that break the theory of, you're not supposed to take hands that you want to bet fold in the flop, you're supposed to check them. I just think there's just way too much value. And also too, like this is the street to get value from now because there aren't many bricks. Like if you check, there aren't many bricks that come on the turn. And whether that's you getting scared off the best hand or you would have gotten called here and, you know, you don't get the value. So what did you do?
Yeah, so I ended up I bet 150, which I think is probably a little too small if you're thinking I should be going larger. But at least my reasoning for doing so is that I thought if either the big blind or MP1 ended up check raising here, I could potentially even get away from this hand. I think if the check raise comes in from MP2 and it would just theoretically be heads up there, I might still be able to continue.
Right. If you bet 150 and then the big blind and MP1 fold and big MP2 check raise all in for like 400 total, of course you're just going to go with it. But
exactly,
if you get check raised by some of the other, I can get along with that. So you go 150, okay.
So I go 150, the big blind snap folds, and then MP1 calls and MP2 calls.
1 and 2 both call. So now the pot is 930, right? Because you put in 450 here. And it looks like you've got, what, like 1,000 left? Something like that?
How much do I have left? I've put in a total of 270 and I started with 1,200. So I've got 930. I think I had exactly a pot size.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the turn is the 5 of spades.
Okay.
And it checks around. I think this is a check here with the flush draw completing. Also, I guess 6-8 comes in as well.
Sure.
I don't think there's any reason.
I mean, this is where, like I said before on the other call, like there's a huge difference between the 5 of spades coming in and the ace of spades. So it gets checked through. Okay.
Gets checked through, and then the river is the king of diamonds.
Okay.
So then MP1 checks and MP2 jams for her remaining 175.
So this is what, now I remember because I was like, aren't you going to get into some crazy pot odds scenario? So to visualize this, hero bet 150 on the flop, MP1 and MP2 called. MP2 only had, you're saying she's jamming for how much on the river here?
175 on the river.
So she only had
started the hand with
320. She only had 320 on the flop, and she called.
Yeah.
She overcalled instead of check jamming, right? And now, with the pot being 930, MP1 checks, MP2 bets 170 all in, right? 170?
175, yeah.
175 all in. So now you're in a situation here where the pot's 1100 and it's 175 for you to call. Now, you also do have a guy behind you as well, which might here's the thing, like this would be worse if you were heads up and you'd be like, oh my god, what's going on here, right? Like queen jack comes in, spades come in, I'm getting like 8-1. This might, but here though, not only because you've got a guy behind you, but she's also betting into two people all in. So I actually think even getting the crazy pot odds in this scenario, multi-way, that I think I find a fold here. And then heads up, it's just like you kind of toss in the chip because it's like, what? I mean, I guess the bluff could be like 8 something, like queen 8, something like that.
Yeah, I just didn't really think she was defending queen 8 suited on a $445 stack.
Right.
Flop
And you 3-bet pre. Yeah.
I mean, I was trying to figure out if there was any chance she was value owning herself here with like jack 10 or queen 10 suited.
No, I don't think so.
But that
on a king river. Remember, everybody's like scared that you c-bet with ace king and now you hit a king. I can't buy that. And again, into two people, it just kind of sucks. You know, I watched over the turn because again, we didn't visualize. You know, the question now is that if she was so short, is there a case for betting the turn here? Because she's so short, the pot's 930, right, on the flop. And then she only has 175 on the turn. Turns the 5 of spades. And then the other guy's got you covered. And you have about a pot size bet left. So is there something to be said for, again, making like a handcuffing bet on the turn of like 200 to 225 to possibly check back rivers? Yeah, she's going to get it all in with you. But I washed over that because I didn't recognize how short she was. So I think there's something to be said about that turn. In standard stacks situations, yeah, it would just be a check back on the turn. But with this like little mini stack in here, I think there's something to be said about that. But as played here, I don't think I find a call here.
Yeah, same. Even though I'm getting like 1,000,000,000 to 1 here, I decided to fold.
So hero folds. Did you ever find out what happened?
No, I asked her. She wouldn't tell me. She told me she'd say it at the end of the night, and then I forgot to ask. So I'm not sure, but I think this is the right fold.
Well, again, like I said, I would take away with definitely considering betting turn here with this little mini stack, although the 5 of spades does bring in more flushes. And it is interesting to note how sometimes it's hard to figure out these like pre-flop ranges when people are really off the wall with some of this stuff. So I appreciate the call, Keith. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Bart.
All right. So even though Tyler must have missed the call in, I'm still going to go over his hand because I think it really demonstrates something that's very, very important. And I want to get this hand up. So this was a hand that I think his name was Tyler P. submitted to me from last week. So I'm just going to do it. And he was a first-time submitter, so I gave a personalized response. Then I was like, wait a minute, I want to cover this hand. Like, this is crazy. It was a very, very short hand, but I think it's something to be said. So, 5-5, 1K effective. I don't know where it was played out of, okay? But there's a button straddle. So, and I believe that hero is on the button. So, button straddle and hero straddles. So, it's 5-5-10. Right? And hijack limps, cutoff, raises to 40. Now, the hijack here has 8. Let's see here. The hijack here has 1,000. So it's 1,000 effective. Well, we said 1,000 effective, right? So hijack limps, cutoff raises to 40. Hero has jack of spades, jack of diamonds on the button, and 3 bets to 140. which is kind of a little bit on the small. I mean, it's 3x, right? The guy, person like limped in from the hijack. So 3 bets to 140 in this particular spot. And the hijack limp calls. This is very, very important. The hijack calls. The hijack calls and the other guy folds. So we've got a limp call, because I've brought so much of this stuff up about what you should pay attention to at the table if you're really unfamiliar with your player. So right away, we are really right off the rails here, right? We've got a limp cold call at a 1K stack in a 3-bet pot, right? 5-5-10. Hijack limps cutoff raise to 40. Hero has jack, 3 bets to 140 on the button. Hijack calls fold. So we're like right under 300 now. The flop comes out 8 of clubs, 7 of diamonds, 4 of diamonds. Hijack checks. Hero bets 140, which is about half the size of the pot. And the hijack calls. So now the pot's probably like 570. And the hijack has like, maybe about 700 left. And again, this is sort of off the rails, because you'd be like, oh, is that a board that you want to see bet? And my counter to that would be, this guy limp called a 3-bet. I mean, he's just off the rails, right? So pot now is about 570. You can start to think about, what do they have, right? They could have 8x, they could have diamonds, straight draws, whatever. The turn is the ace of spades. And the hijack checks. And the hero checks behind. Now, it's kind of interesting, because this isn't the most interesting part of this hand, but it kind of follows a theme about these hands from, today. Can we again sort of make this sort of variable turn size handcuffing bet here on the turn? I mean, it's a disconnected high card, but an ace is a little bit different than like an offsuit king or an offsuit queen, in the sense that you will see ace-x suited represented a lot, like with this type of pre-flop holding. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if this guy, this limp caller to 3 bets has like ace-5, ace-6, something like that suited. Ace-x of diamonds now is the nut flush draw that is paired up. So I would still tend to kind of make a little bit of a handcuffing bet here in position if I was the hero, of possibly like 150 to 200, something like that, to get value from some draws. But it's not surprising that the hero checks behind. So hero checks behind. And now the river is the 3 of hearts. So the board is ace of clubs, 7 of diamonds, 4 of diamonds, and a 3-bet pot against the limp caller. Hijack checks, hero 140, call. Turns the ace of spades, 8-7-4, ace. Check, check. The river's the 3 of hearts. And now the hijack jams all in for $720. Over the size of the pot. Over the size of the pot. 720 into about 570. So the pot's right around 1300. 720 for the hero to call. Now, why do I think this hand is so interesting? And what do I think is the most important part of this hand? Or there's a couple of things, but what would I lean towards? What would I look back at in terms of this overall hand that would lead me to the decision that I'm going to make here? Well, when you're starting to characterize players that you don't know, right? You look for common patterns, inconsistent things that, right off the top are very noticeable. I always say, well, you look for showdowns. You see a guy like limp in from under the gun, and he turns over like jack 4 suited at showdown. Immediately he's a bad player here, right? Well, here you have a situation that is a very, very polarizing river bet. But if I knew nothing about the guy, I could see that the hijack limp cold called a 3-bet. Limp cold called a 3-bet. Now, what that immediately usually is going to make me think is he's a bad player. This is almost the equivalent is if I saw somebody limp call with jack 5 suited and that got down to showdown. Okay. So that right there. After we see this action and I tag this guy as a bad player, what do I think about this sizing at the end? bad players that make this type of sizing at the end are immediately polarized, unbelievably polarized. Even if they weren't a bad player, they would be incredibly polarized. And what that means is that, and I don't even know if a limp caller pre-flop from the hijack is taking this type of sizing with aces up. But this is never ace 9 of diamonds going for value. This is like a flopped straight or a set or a busted draw. Like, that's the two categories of hands that this guy has. And I always find it really, really interesting after, if we're playing out of the hero's perspective, when we check back a blank ace, if the guy really did have thick value, you could put yourself in the head of a bad player. You see they tend to over slow play. They don't recognize, they're not going to be sophisticated enough to overbet in a spot where the hero might be forced to call down in a certain spot. They're usually looking for trying to get called, and they don't think the hero's strong because he checks back an ace. Okay, so there's that. So not only is it unbelievably polarized, but it would be shocking to me that that category of value portion, that value portion of my opponent's range would take this type of sizing. I would call here, and I wouldn't think about it twice because of the fact that this guy is representing, like I said, a flop straight or a set. He's never going to have ace-x of diamonds. But the most important part of this whole thing is that there's something very, very simple that you can take away from this, where maybe this is not a call against somebody else if we knew nothing about the guy. The most important part of this decision is the fact that he limp called a 3-bet. I can draw, or I do draw, so much from that limp call that I immediately categorize him as a bad player, just the same as I might categorize somebody who is way off the rails at showdown based upon some sort of pre-flop holding. And that's a common question that I've gotten. How do we figure out how somebody plays? I can never fold here to a limp call to 3-bets the way that this hand went down if a guy is so polarized, especially if he's going to most likely take a value sizing that's a little bit smaller after we have feigned some weakness on the turn. So I told Tyler I would call for those reasons. And he said that he folded. Tyler folded. And the hijack showed queen of diamonds, 10 of diamonds for a busted front door flush draw. So, poker's not overly complex. There are many, many things that you can immediately recognize, and that's something that I would spot right away. So I thought that that was very, very interesting, and just that little tidbit of information that anybody could gain if they were paying attention to it. So I'm sorry that Tyler couldn't call in, but that's going to wrap it up for us. We did, 4 calls and 5 hands. Thank you guys very, very much for joining me. Again, if you do want to get in on the show, you can do so by clicking on the link in the description. We will be back at the regular time next week on Monday. And for all you Crush Live Poker website subscribers, we'll put this up obviously in Discord. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you guys all next time.